I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Lyn Ulbricht. She has traveled the world speaking on behalf of her son and important topics from our rights on the internet to due process and fair trials. 3 things that we are now witnessing the courts ignore. I have followed this case because it relates to my life in many ways. Ross is about my age, with interests in advanced technology and a drive to make the world a better place through various avenues of activism. Ross is an example to me in many ways, and this is a tragic example of what the government can and will do to those it sees as stepping out of line. Thanks so much for joining us, Lyn. And that would be...
Thanks for having me.
We're having you on today because a guy named Nick Bilton wrote a book called The American Kingpin, The Epic Hunt for the Criminal Mastermind Behind the Silk Road, which is full of some half-truths and some untruths, and really paints the story from a very specific point of view. And I really thought it was important to give you a moment, give you a platform as much as possible to sort of get your side out, get Ross's side out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's really hard to fight big media. They have a very loud voice. I'm one person, and actually, in a way, this is a very difficult distraction from what I really want to do, which is support Ross's case in the courts. And yet it's so disturbing and upsetting to read things that I'm like, first of all, they're prying into Ross's personal life in a very kind of tabloid way, which I find despicable, but also things that little things and more important things that are either I know to be untrue or are unproven, and that Nick Bilton is talking about in a fictionalized version as if they're fact. And so it's very, very disturbing and hopefully not damaging as far as Ross's case. Hopefully judges don't read this kind of stuff. But it certainly is upsetting for me and our family, and for Ross, who can't defend himself, who's sitting in a cage right now, who's just got to, without being able to respond, take this and have, this whole major media feeding frenzy, basically sucking off his life and profiting off of it without solid proof of anything, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it definitely seems like he's just trying to fictionalize or write a novel to entertain people using a very serious person's life and story.
Right.
It's not acceptable.
Well, he himself has come out publicly and said he thinks Ross deserved life. This is more harsh than actually the Sentencing Reform Act says. It's basically saying any drug dealer, not that Ross is actually a drug dealer, should be responsible if someone buys something from them and overdoses. This is actually not the law.
Right.
Drug dealers are not put up for murder. He's basically saying, by the same theory, shouldn't Jeff Bezos be doing life, because a mother is suing Amazon and the vendor because her daughter bought cyanide on Amazon and killed herself with it. This is what Nick Bilton is saying. And I think it shows his slant. I was warned by someone who kind of knew him, knew people involved in the project, not to get involved with it, because they told me it was going to be a regurgitation of the government's narrative. And as far as I can tell, that is what he sees his job, is to argue the government's case that they didn't bother to bring to trial, and to argue it for them in the court of public opinion, while throwing in stuff like, oh, I talked to somebody who went out with Ross on a date and he was really boring because all he did was talk about cryptocurrency. And I'm like, wow, you're really resorting to some low blows, man.
And
was every date you went on, were you scintillating? And shall we go back and dig into your life and get whatever girl that you went out with, what they have to say about you? I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah, and all you would have gotten if you had participated anyway would have been like a byline or a mention, or well, this is what his mom says. So
well, it also shows my cooperation and my kind of tacit support of the project if I'm involved. And that's always the question with the media. It's like, well, they say they want to present Ross's side, but you know, and like you say, I'm just the mom. People are going, well, of course his mother says that, which is why I don't come out and say what I think. I just say, look, this is what the government did. These are facts. I don't want to, you know, I can get up and plead as his mother and say, oh, I know that's not true about my darling boy. And that's true. But the fact is, he's never been charged with murder for hire or prosecuted. It's unsubstantiated. And this is even a point in the appeal where a former federal judge, Nancy Gertner, plus Drug Policy Alliance, plus LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and Just Leadership USA challenged the sentence, saying, you're dragging in stuff that's wasn't even in trial, this murder for hire that you never bothered to charge, and now you're using it at sentencing? And that's exactly what Nick Bilton is doing.
Yeah, exactly. If he was guilty of that, you would think they would have brought it up in the trial at some point.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly don't hold back on charges, as far as I can tell.
If anything, I mean, yeah, if anything, they overcharged to cast a negative light on him, and then later withdraw the charges. I remember something like
they did that actually. Yeah. They did that exact thing. They convicted on 7 counts, and then, oh well, that's redundant to this, and that's redundant to that. So really, it's just 5. Now, just 5 is still a lot, but why were the other ones in there before if they were redundant? Because that's what they do. I was told by his attorney, they pile on charges to prejudice a jury. There's a lot of things that I've learned that the government does in prosecuting someone that is, I'm shocked. I mean, I'm not anymore, but I was very shocked that they would resort to these kind of things. And now I guess because they couldn't charge him at trial, they've got people like Nick Bilton who can just keep going with this stuff in the court of public opinion, or attempt to.
And I think most people would be shocked to actually see, like, I think everyone just sort of assumes a just legal system is there to back them up and to protect them. And right, the people that see that it's not a just system are the ones that are already caught in it and are already assumed to be criminals because they're caught in it. So there's a missing view into this system that this case gives us a great window on, I think.
I've had so many people come up to me since this happened to say, you won't believe what happened to me. I mean, I can't even count how many. I had no idea, you know, how many until then. But there's also just a ton of misinformation in what he says very casually throughout. And I'm going to put up a bulleted list. Even some of them are trivial, but it accumulates into, well, this, you didn't mention this, and this isn't true, and this is a little distorted, and this, you know, and just put it up. But I need to confirm it, and I want to confirm some of it with Ross. But for example, he calls Ross a programmer and a coder. Ross is not a programmer and a coder. He never was. He told me he doesn't even know any programs. Never did. This is like, no, he's not a programmer. He didn't, you know, he never studied that. And, you know, that's just one example. There's a lot of them. And he talks about Berettas and AK-47s being sold on Silk Road. I wasn't on Silk Road, so I don't know for firsthand, but I've talked to researchers who've done tons of research and said that's not true. And that guns were sold on the Armory for 5 months. Maybe they were on Silk Road very briefly, but I don't think very long. If they were taken off. If they were on there, apparently, I don't know. Different people say different things.
But you know, but you know who was on the Silk Road? Dread Pirate Roberts, weeks after Ross was already in prison, I believe, right?
Yes, that's correct. 7 weeks. He doesn't mention that. He said he was the one and only DPR. I'm like, well, who was that logging in from the DPR account then?
Yeah, somebody did. Could have been those corrupt federal agents. Like, this thing is so poisoned from end to end. It's insane to me.
It's pretty insane, and it keeps being more insane. And I was like, okay, you know, what next? And then this comes out, you know. I knew it was coming. I was warned it was coming. And it's just, awful. And it's very time consuming to combat it. So I'm not going to. I mean, I'm going to talk to you and a few other people and put some stuff up on my blog, and then just hope at least the people who are in our base who understand the big picture will understand what's going on here. As far as combating the book itself in the wider circulation, hopefully it won't be very successful. It's kind of old news in a way. It's all based on government stuff from before. You know, if people want to read that stuff, I can't stop them. And he did say that every single person he interviewed, and he said it was very remarkable. He emailed me this. in trying to convince me to be involved. Not one person said they disliked Ross, and on the contrary, that he was kind, compassionate, great guy, stood up for the underdog, all the stuff. And yet he thinks he should be in prison for life. So Nick Bilton doesn't believe in restitution or rehabilitation or anything like that. He believes in very, very harsh punishment based on really because he said, the reasoning he said was that he talked to, because he feels, luckily courts are not based on feelings, feels that he deserves it because he talked to parents whose children, or, they were, maybe one was a teenager, but I believe the other one brought up at sentencing was Ross's age, OD'd on, or died, he said OD'd, on drugs from Silk Road. The only ones I know of that have been brought forward were at sentencing. That is being challenged because a forensic pathologist said, he went over all the autopsies and submitted this as evidence. You can't possibly definitively say these drugs were from Silk Road. You can't say that a couple of them, they were from drugs at all. One person had just gotten out of the hospital. And one was a teenager who had some issues. I don't even want to go into it because I do feel for any parent who's lost a child for any way. But to say Ross deserves life because this happened when he doesn't even really know that Ross was doing anything on Silk Road at the time. He believes it, but that's different. It's pretty harsh.
Right. And of course, as tragic as it is, the kid involved did it to himself. I mean, the website didn't do it to him.
Nobody forced anything.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, you had to get a Tor, you had to know how to use Tor, and you had to open a Bitcoin account to get on Silk Road.
You had to really try.
I'm not saying you had to really try. Yeah. And look, I'm not going to get into defending Silk Road or any drugs sales or drugs at all. I'm not. And Ross himself, we've talked about it. He said, look, no decent person would advocate crystal meth or heroin or dangerous drugs. But his point about the drug war, and mine is too, is that we wish they didn't exist, but enforcing the government's force to enforce our wishes never works out. And after over 45 years and over $1 trillion, people are still using drugs. There's more sites up on the dark net than ever that have no ethics, no restrictions like Silk Road did, for instance, with child pornography. And there were, no violent services like assassin. You read all kinds of stuff in the media, and I'm like, do you people do any more than the most shallow research?
No. It's
just really pretty incredible to me.
Yeah.
And which is why I guess only 6% of the people believe them. But I believe pretty much, not much nothing that I read in the mainstream media without checking it, because why would I? After this experience, this whole thing,
I only have one question that I've ever wanted to ask you about the trial, and I think it's a critical one, and I'm sure you've answered it before. The two corrupt people, I think there's a DEA agent and an FBI agent that were corrupt and put in jail.
Let me point out.
Sorry?
DEA was one.
Okay.
NSA, and this came out after trial, he was working for the NSA at the time and Secret Service, Sean Bridges.
Got it.
So I think it's interesting that he was working for the NSA at the time. But anyway.
So the question is, so we have two bad actors involved in this case. How much of the evidence used to convict him came from these two sources, and was that even allowed to be questioned in that case?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's a very important question. First of all, the defense fought to have the jury know that there were two corrupt agents who had run of the site, because it wasn't just stealing. They were crypto technological computer experts. That's why they were on the job. They were at the core of the investigation in Maryland. They had run of the site. They could commandeer accounts, including DPRs. I have no proof they did. I'm just saying they had the ability.
Sure. They
could change passwords, PIN numbers. They could change chats, delete chats, which happened. We found evidence that this did happen. They could, and also we found evidence that someone used the DPR account. So, but anyway, they had access to keys, bank accounts. So it wasn't just stealing, which of course they used this access to steal. but they had the ability to change evidence, and that was the evidence the jury saw.
Yeah.
The jury also saw evidence that we now have proof that it was tampered with, and a whole section deleted. So that is one thing.
Yep.
As we fought to have that known to the jury, the prosecutor's like, well, no, because that'll hamper our investigation into these people if it's known. So the defense said, okay, we'll wait till you finish your investigation and then we'll have a fair trial. And the judge said, no, we were going to do it now. And you cannot mention them. You cannot allude to them. You cannot have anything that even tangentially refers to their existence. In addition, the defense didn't even know about one of them. They weren't even informed until after trial that Sean Bridges existed. And then it was after that that it came out that he was working for the NSA.
Okay.
So
that's
the jury
exactly
had no
what I was
idea
afraid
about
of.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all, it's in the appeal. It's a big part of the appeal because, of course, that's part of the Brady rule, which says prosecutors cannot preclude exculpatory evidence, to the favor of the defendant in a trial. And they absolutely did. They did everything they could to block it, and the judge cooperated with them.
Okay. So I guess kind of in closing, can you give us like the current state of his case, the current state of affairs, and then maybe talk a little bit about
Sure.
how he's holding up?
Yeah, I just saw him yesterday. Okay, the current state of his affairs is that we're waiting. The appeal's been filed, the oral arguments have been made, and that was last October. The appeal was filed last June. So now we wait for the appellate court to rule. And I have been told by lawyers, there's no way to really know, but that the longer they take, the better, because it means they're really looking at it carefully. And so we're waiting for them to rule. There's three ways it could go that I understand it. One is they say, no relief. It's all fine the way it is. We're not going to change anything. Or they could say the convictions stand, but the sentencing is wrong. So you get a new sentencing. We had asked for one in front of a different judge for obvious reasons. Hopefully they would see the reasonableness of that. Or they could say that based on, for instance, the unconstitutional warrants used with the laptop seizure, for one example, and throw the laptop out and we need a new trial, or say the corruption should be allowed to be known to the jury, new trial. They could say new trial. Just 2 weeks ago, the Second Circuit ruled in a case that did say a sentence was too draconian and reversed that, and the person will get a new sentencing. So we think that's hopeful because it's the same circuit. It's a way out of proportion sentence for that circuit especially. And, Ross, just to be clear, Ross is not only not charged with murder for hire, as Nick Bilton has, he's made himself judge, jury, and executioner, basically.
Sure, yeah.
Plus psychologist and mind reader and, all that. Seriously, Ross imagined this, Ross felt this, Ross, it's like, really? Okay, great. They don't even know him, never met him. In any case, where was I going with that? All his charges are nonviolent. There's no victim came forward at trial saying Ross Ulbricht, hurt me. Nobody came forward, no witness came forward at trial to say, I saw Ross Ulbricht, I can say that Ross Ulbricht wrote these chats. Lots of people say, well, obvious, and people inside Silk Road, it's in the Deep Web Book documentary, say, it's obvious there were more than one. We all knew there was more than one DPR. Very different personalities would come on, very different. There's a lot of discussion about that. Actually, the defense tried to bring it up at trial. That was shot down by the judge.
And if I remember correctly, it was just because he didn't think it was relevant. Like, it was like the judge's opinion, right? There wasn't a reason to get rid of it.
She said that about shooting down the Bitcoin witness and the tech witness. But as far as that, I cannot remember her exact words, so I don't want to say. But basically, she didn't allow it. She didn't allow our defense attorney to say give at least some cast reasonable doubt that Ross was the one and only, as Nick Bilton says, by the way. Nick Bilton says he's the one and only, despite recent, proof that someone else signed in his DPR.
Right.
But in any case, they're all nonviolent, and it's a really over-the-top sentence. Even if everything that they had a trial that Ross did, everything they say, it's an over-the-top sentence.
Yeah, I've never heard of such a sentence for such a for nonviolent crimes.
Yeah, with something you do with a computer. But you know what's really sad? Since the drug war, there's been an appalling spike in life sentences. And the ACLU's report says 3,000 people serving life right now are nonviolent. It's a really terrible trend. And of course, it fuels the prison money-making machine,
sure,
and power-grabbing machine of the drug war. And that's a whole other subject. But this is a perfect example of what they do. And they, private prisons, but also public prisons, make money off of prisoners. They're a commodity. They're a inventory, really.
So
it's a really terrible thing.
So how can we help? I know that there's a new. I participated in the. I don't know if you guys can see this in the last sort of drawing thing that they did, where you basically pay to unlock little squares, and then when the whole thing's unlocked, everybody gets to see his drawing from court. And I really like this. It's one of my favorite things. We're going to hang it up in the new studio here.
Oh, cool.
And there's a new one going on right now, right?
Yeah, there is. There's another one going on. It's totally different. And it only costs $1, and you can send Ross a message, and that helps uplift him and through that game. And that's really great. If you buy through Amazon, through our site, we get a little bit back, and it helps. And of course, donations always help. Spreading the word, retweeting me, following me, sharing what I put up. That's really important, and some people have a big reach, and I'm trying to get people to see that. That's why I made that video, because, and there's so much more I could have said, but you want to keep it, relatively short.
Right.
But just spreading the word. I mean, I appreciate your interest, and this isn't just about Ross is the thing.
Yeah.
And anyone who's dealt with the media, I mean, there have been so many books where people said, hey, they're saying all this stuff about me, and where do they get this stuff, That happens all the time. The media, all the time. Everybody I know who's dealt with them says the same thing.
There's a lot of lessons that every American can learn
also
from this
the
case.
Government.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the erosion of our protections, because Ross's due process rights were not allowed. They were not honored in that trial, and that puts us all in peril. The situation in the courts now is, from my opinion, pretty dire. I mean, people don't even want to go to trial. They're warned not to go to trial because better plea, even if you didn't do it. Oh, that's another thing Bilton said, which I'd like to just say. He says Ross was offered many plea deals. No, he was not. Not that I know of. Now, maybe there's ones I was never told of by his lawyer or him, and Bilton somehow knows. But as far as I know, he was offered one, and it wasn't really a deal. It was 10 years or whatever the judge wants to give you. That means if the judge gives you life, as she did, you don't get to appeal it. It wasn't really a plea deal in the sense that I've always understood it, which is you plea and you get 10 years. And he goes, well, it was Ross's hubris that stopped him from taking this plea deal. No, it was his attorney's advice that stopped him from taking it. And this is stuff that he's just saying. And it's just very disturbing and really angers me. But, what am I going to do?
Yeah, so that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because, one inaccuracy is an accident. A whole list of them is just bad, terrible journalism or profiteering.
Yeah, even if they're small, they add up. And I'm going to start compiling them and posting them and keeping it an ongoing thing. And some of them are not completely wrong. They're just distorted, which to me is one step away from a lie.
Yep.
So, it's painting a picture that it works for him, because if you keep a story simple that people can understand and, it's sensationalistic, that sells more books.
All right.
It's a complicated case. You'd have to really want to stick with it. Anyway, yeah.
Yes,
so thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for
Appreciate it.
coming on. This case,
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
I wanted to have you to just again remind people this is an ongoing, living case that's not over yet. We still have the chance to save this guy's life and get him freed.
Yeah.
Please like
I'm
and
hoping
share.
for that.
Please donate. I have and will continue to. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And hey, I hope I meet you sometime in person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so that does it for our interview with Lyn. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us for a few minutes about the current status of affairs and this absurd book. I was talking with my mother yesterday about this interview and in all the ways that it does relate to me and my situation and what could have been or happened to me. Now, I'm not trying to elevate myself to Ross's status or capabilities or anything, but as a guy who's motivated to make the world a better place, to be an activist, I thought about how it was entirely possible, and maybe in the future, entirely possible that I end up on the opposite side of the government in some case against me if I do or say the wrong thing that pits them against me or makes me some sort of criminal in their eyes. It's entirely possible that I might speak some truth to power that might piss someone off, that might have them come down on me with less than true allegations, just like we've seen them do with Ross. And so talking with my mom, I realized that, had I been in his situation, she would probably be in in Lyn's situation. She would be, I know my mom, she would be righteously fighting for justice and my freedom, and she would be breaking out of her shell and going to meet with all these people and all these groups and, gathering support and fundraising and I realized then through my connection with my mom, through thinking about my mom in Lyn's shoes, I connect really personally to this case and to what she's doing and her fight and the cost that it takes on their family. It certainly shows what an amazing family and an amazing mother and father that Ross has to have in many ways, overturned their life to stop everything to do what it takes to free Ross. And that when we find good people under attack with good families defending them, it's important for us to support them and to back them up and to show them that we're going to help and we're here too. So that's why I wanted to speak with Lyn. That's why I'm motivated to help Ross. And I hope all of you will be too. Please go to freeross.org, donate in whatever way you can, even if it's just liking and sharing. Thanks, guys. I really hope that, man, so we don't even know if it's going to get an appeal yet, is where we're at. But it probably will, because there's like 18 things, they have like 18 reasons to appeal it, right?
What I've been told is the probability is a new sentencing, in which case we would appeal the convictions to a higher court or to court again, or you keep going, and the government will probably appeal the appeal decision if it's not everything they want. It's sort of what happens. It's this whole process. Of course, meanwhile, Ross's life is ticking away. Yeah, sure. In this cage, and the place he is, they made a big deal in Vanity Fair. Oh, he's in the same place as El Chapo. I'm like, yeah, that's true. Your point. Oh, I see. He's a kingpin too. Whatever. But it's a horrible place. El Chapo's lawyers are protesting. The UN has called it torture, and it's really not designed for long term. But Ross wanted to be there because he doesn't have email, and he wanted to be able to communicate with his lawyers who are on the East Coast. So in any case, I don't know. It's a pretty rough. It's hard long term. But in any case, that's where he is right now. Okay. And his life, his very precious life is being wasted